So let us talk about the subarachnoid cistern. Now most of the important cisterns you can appreciate them in a sagittal section of the brain. If you take a sagittal section that passes through the corpus callosum, the brainstem and all, and through the fourth ventricle. So we are going to consider that section here. We are going to talk about the subarachnoid cistern. Subarachnoidal cistern, which I said is nothing but the dilated subarachnoidal spaces. The dilated subarachnoidal spaces is called as the subarachnoid cistern. So let us take a midsagittal section which passes through the corpus callosum. So there we have, let's say this is the corpus callosum here. Please draw it with me. So there is a corpus callosum. There we have the brainstem, that is midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata. As I said, this is midbrain, the pons, medulla oblongata. In the transverse section, this is in the sagittal section, this is how they will look like. The midbrain will look more constricted because the section goes through the interpeduncular fossa. Then the pons, the dilated part, and then we have medulla oblongata. Now this portion of the corpus callosum is called as the splenium. I am just writing S here. This is the splenium of the corpus callosum, which we will talk about in the corpus callosum. Now below the splenium of corpus callosum there is a gland, that is pineal gland. So below the splenium we have a gland, that is pineal gland. I am writing this PG here, pineal gland. And what is the location of cerebellum? We said cerebellum is mainly against which part of the brainstem? The pons. So let us say there is pons here and also against the medulla oblongata, mainly against the pons. So there, make sure that when you draw this cerebellum, it should be mainly behind the pons. So there we have the cerebellum. And what was the location of fourth ventricle? The fourth ventricle was present between the pons and the cerebellum. So guys, there we have the fourth ventricle. So this is the mid-sagittal section we are looking at. There is the cerebellum. Now let us consider if this black line here is representing the pia mater, the one which is more adherent to the brain, the one which is more faithful to the brain. The next we are going to draw is the arachnoid mater. The arachnoid mater, which is usually runs along the curvatures of the brain, but at certain places it will leave the space deep to it, and that is called as subarachnoidal cistern. So guys, just follow this red line here. Look at this. There is a space present in front of the midbrain. There is a space in front of the pons. Above the cerebellum. And below the cerebellum. Make sure you draw it correctly. 1, 2, 3 and 4. These are the 4 cisterns I can appreciate here. As I said, this red line represents the arachnoid mater. And the 4 cisterns, let us start from here. Now this one is called as the Cisterna magna. Cisterna magna. The largest cistern, so we call it the Cisterna magna. Now cisterna magna is present between the cerebellum and medulla oblongata if you see, so it is also called as cerebellomedullary cistern. Cerebellomedullary cistern. Now this is the largest cistern. If let's say for some reason if lumbar puncture is not possible, then we'll go for the cisternal puncture from the cisterna magna. Now cisterna magna is used for the cisternal puncture rather than any other cistern inside the cranial cavity for two reasons. I can say that one, it is easily approachable from the foramen magnum, it is easily approachable, the cisterna magna, and secondly the cisterna magna is the largest cistern and there is no blood vessel present inside. We do have important blood vessels related to other cisterns. This is the cistern which is only having CSF, largest cistern and easily approachable from the foramen magnum. So cisterna magna is therefore used for the cisternal puncture. Another cistern which is present here is called as cisterna ambiens. That is the cisterna ambiens. The ambient cistern, the cisterna ambiens. What we have in cisterna ambiens is the vein which will continue as the straight sinus. We discussed the straight sinus, remember? The straight sinus which goes as a transverse sinus and sigmoid sinus. That straight sinus is actually found by the continuation of this vein which is a content of cisterna ambiens, and guys this vein is called as great cerebral vein, also called as the vein of Galen, called as the great cerebral vein or the vein of Galen. So that's the content of the cisterna ambiens, the great cerebral vein or the vein of Galen. The cistern which is present in front of the pons is called as cisterna pontis. And what is running in front of the pons? In front of the pons we have basilar artery. So the content of cisterna pontis is basilar artery. The two vertebral artery will unite to form the basilar artery, and that is running right in front of the pons which is present in the cisterna pontis. Now this cistern over here, the one which is present in front of the midbrain, let us see what is the name of this cistern and why do we call it that with that name. Now if you take a transverse section of the midbrain, now this is how the midbrain will look like. You will have the two big crus cerebri. If this is a transverse section from the midbrain, guys, now these dilated extensions, these huge extensions anteriorly in the midbrain are called as crus cerebri. You can call them crus cerebri or you can call them cerebral peduncle. Cerebral peduncles. See, there are two types of peduncle we will talk about, the cerebral peduncle and cerebellar peduncles. When you say cerebral peduncle, that means it is carrying all the descending tract coming from the cortex. The corticonuclear, the corticospinal, the corticopontine, all the tracts are present here in this anterior part of the midbrain and we call it crus cerebri or cerebral peduncle. This space between the cerebral peduncle here, this region, if let's say if I cover this with the arachnoid matter, now what is this cistern here? This cistern is the one which you are looking at in front of the midbrain, because the section goes from the midline. So this is the cistern which is present in front of the midbrain, and that's why we call it interpeduncular cistern. This is called as interpeduncular cistern in front of the midbrain between the two crus cerebri or cerebral peduncle, so we call it interpeduncular cistern. Content, there was the basilar artery in the pontine cistern. Now this basilar artery will go above in the interpeduncular cistern and will contribute to the formation of the circle of Willis. So the content here will be the circle of Willis. So guys, interpeduncular cistern contains circle of Willis, cisterna pontis basilar artery, cisterna magna that is nothing over there, we only have CSF in that region, and cisterna ambiens we have the great cerebral vein. So these are the four major cisterns that you will see in the superior lateral surface of the brain. The one cistern which you cannot appreciate here is the one which you see on the superior lateral surface of the brain. These are seen in the sagittal section and that is called as this. What sulcus is this, guys? This sulcus here is called as the Sylvian sulcus, and along the Sylvian sulcus we have a cistern called as Sylvian cistern. What is there in the Sylvian cistern? The major artery which supplies the superior lateral surface of the brain, and that is middle cerebral artery. So the content of Sylvian cistern is middle cerebral artery. So cistern present along the superior lateral surface of the brain, which is running along with the posterior limb of lateral sulcus, also called as the Sylvian sulcus. We call it Sylvian cistern. And what is running over there? We have the major artery which is supplying the superior lateral surface, that is middle cerebral artery over there. So this is about the major subarachnoidal cistern and their contents.